Hello everyone, Tom with Capo Fetish. Today on the channel we're going to talk about some cool unsung singer-songwriter 70s albums. We have 10 here to feature. I'm going to start off here with a really fine singer-songwriter from the 70s. She's mostly known for songs she's written for other people like Maria Muldaur, El Chicano, Judy Collins, Barbie Benton, Twiggy, Randy Meisner, Kim Carnes, Crystal Gayle, Helen Reddy, Bette Midler, Cher, Alison Krauss, and on and on. She's also done a lot of backup vocals on other artists' albums, like Linda Ronson's Heart Like a Wheel record, Bob Welch, Jon Stewart, Randy Newman, Jimmy Buffett, and on and on. She's been all over the place. But not a lot of people know about her solo albums. She released 5 solo albums on Warner Brothers from the early 70s to the late 70s. For me, this is my favorite album of hers. I'm talking about Wendy Waldman. This is her album here, The Main Refrain. This is a fantastic record. There's such a rich treasure of songs on here. There's a song on here, well, first off, the title track is one of the greatest singer-songwriter songs of all time, called The Main Refrain. Anybody can relate to the lyrics to that song. It's very meaningful. On side 2, it starts off with a song called Goodbye Summer Wind, which should have been like a huge hit. It has such hit potential, but it never was. Another one called The Eagle and the Owl is another favorite of mine on here. But there's another one, if I could see it. It's called Prayer for You. Just a beautiful ballad. I'd say just about this entire record is just about flawless. And it really showcases Wendy Waldman's singer-songwriter abilities. Her voice and her whole kind of vibe always reminded me a little bit of Laura Nyro. There's definitely a Laura Nyro influence here on Wendy Waldman's songwriting. But she has her own stamp, her own delivery, her own style. So if you could search out any of her albums she did for Warner Brothers, this is one of her best. It's called The Main Refrain. Very talented singer-songwriter, Wendy Waldman, The Main Refrain from 1976. Another great one here is from James Taylor's brother, Livingston Taylor. And the album is called Live. This is from 1970 or 71, I believe. And one thing you'll notice when you listen to this album is how much Livingston Taylor's voice sounds just like JT's voice. It's unbelievable. It's like the nuance, the phrasing, it's incredible. They're both different kinds of songwriters, but he's a fine songwriter in his own right. He never quite reached the masses like JT did, but there are some great tracks on here. One, the first track called Get Out of Bed is a real uplifting little track. Another one, Open Your Eyes. Another one called Be That Way, Truck Driving Man. Here's the inside of the cover here of Live. He also had another great one, I think in 70. It was just titled Livingston Taylor. That was on Atlantic Records. This one was on Capricorn. And I always loved the Capricorn label, that pink label. This is the label that the Allman Brothers and countless others were on in the early 70s. But if you ever run into any of these early Livingston Taylor albums, they're really good. And heavily influenced, I think, by his brother, James Taylor. But he has his own stamp as well on his own music. But yeah, really good stuff here. Livingston Taylor, the album's called Live, and this is from 1971. A guy that was touted as the next Dylan, but the hype kind of died down pretty quickly. Nobody really talks about this guy much. I think he's fantastic. I saw him open for Edie Brickell back in 1988. Guy is Steve Forbert, and this was his huge breakthrough here in America. The album called Jack Rabbit Slim. He had an almost top 10 single with Romeo's Tune. Just barely, almost scraped the top 10. I think it hit number 11. He definitely had his own kind of vibe, his own kind of style. This came out in 1979. A lot of cool stuff on here. He's had countless albums in his discography. I have a few other ones, but this one kind of stands out to me, and this is another great one called Jack Rabbit Slim. I think at the time it was hailed as something really amazing, kind of fell off the radar. No one really talks about it anymore. I think it's fantastic. Steve Forbert, Jack Rabbit Slim from 1979. Here's an album that still has yet to be re-released on LP or CD for some reason. There must be legality issues or whatever. But I think this Buckingham Nicks album is fantastic. This came out in 1973, 2 years before they joined Fleetwood Mac for their self-titled album. Some of the tracks on here would later become tracks on the Fleetwood Mac album. And I think some of the tracks, like Crystal, sound even better on this album than they do on the self-titled Fleetwood Mac album. But there's just a lot of riches on here. Lindsey Buckingham, you could tell that he's just out of the gate, really talented. Don't Let Me Down Again. They kind of trade off songs here. You have Long Distance Winter by Stevie Nicks, Crying in the Night by Stevie Nicks, and Without a Leg to Stand On by Lindsey Buckingham. Then, of course, Crystal by Stevie Nicks. A fantastic record. I still don't know, to this day why it has not been re-released. But if you could find a copy of it, pick it up. It's fantastic. Buckingham Nicks from 73. This is on the Polydor record label. One of my favorite songwriters of all time, and this is really based on the 2 years he was in Love and Spoonful. He Could Really Do No Wrong from 65 to 67. His first solo album, though, is really, really strong. I'm talking about John Sebastian. This came out in 1970 on Reprise Records. He does some reworkings of a few Love and Spoonful tracks on here. You're a Big Boy Now. There's some really great, just slow tracks here. Some standards here that are well known from John Sebastian fans. She's a Lady is a gorgeous track. Red Eye Express. I Had a Dream is beautiful. You have also Baby Don't You Get Crazy. Magical Connection. Rainbows All Over Your Blues. John Sebastian from 1970 with a cast of characters on this album. Got Dallas Taylor on drums, Graham Nash on harmony. You got David Crosby, of course. Good stuff. John Sebastian, real talented guy here. First solo album from 1970 titled John B. Sebastian. Another guy that's put out so many solo records, but he's mainly known in Canada. He really didn't make much of a dent here in the U.S. He did have that song Rocket Launcher, which got a little bit of airplay in the late 80s. Was it the late 80s? I believe so. But out of all I think I have about a half a dozen Bruce Coburn albums, but this is my absolute favorite. This is an absolute masterpiece, this album. The Further Adventures of Bruce Coburn. There is just not a single track on here that is bad. They're all just incredible tracks. Songs like Rainfall, another one called Laughing, Bright Sky. Just great stuff. If you ever want to hear this album, pull it up on YouTube, or if you ever see it, pick it up. It's just fantastic. His guitar playing is really unique. He's a really unique songwriter. His voice, very, very underrated here in the U.S. But this album right here, for me is a 5-star masterpiece. Bruce Coburn, The Further Adventures of. From the late 70s. A guy that pretty much kickstarted the new wave. I wouldn't even say punk, but it was very influential in the new wave movement. Recorded the debut album of the Modern Lovers in 1971, produced by John Cale. Eventually discarded that whole kind of aesthetic and did a 180 and started doing like more kind of naive, kind of whimsical kind of songwriting. And of all the albums I have of Jonathan Richman, this one, it has some just gems on it. This is called Back in Your Life from 1979. The title track is just fantastic. Really, really humorous lyrics. Another great one too I've always loved is My Love is a Flower Just Beginning to Bloom. I'm Nature's Mosquito. Buzz, Buzz, Buzz. Affection is such a great track, Affection. And Abdul and Cleopatra. So if you want some really just naive, innocent singer-songwriter material in your collection, get this album, Back in Your Life by Jonathan Richman and the Modern Lovers from 1979. Another one too that no one ever talks about much, but it's Ronnie Blakeley. And she was a person that put out about one or two solo albums. This is her first solo album on Elektra. But she would also go on to be an actress. She was nominated for Best Supporting Actress in a film called Nashville in 1975. She also starred in a role in the Nightmare on Elm Street that came out in 1984. She also played in Bob Dylan's Rolling Thunder Revue in 1975, also sung on his song Hurricane, doing backup vocals. This is her first solo album, just called Ronnie Blakeley. Really, really talented singer-songwriter. She didn't really do much after this, except a little bit of acting. But if you ever see this, pick it up or just pull it up on YouTube. There's some fantastic tracks on here. She has a really, really cool voice. A lot of people, a lot of well-known studio cats on this album here. Of course, you got Linda Ronstadt doing background vocals on Bluebird, Russ Kunkel on drums. All those kind of 1970s studio cats like Lee Sklar on bass. Really good stuff. Ronnie Blakeley's debut album on Elektra from 1972. And then when it comes to Leonard Cohen, not a lot of people talk about his fourth album. This came out in 1974. It's called New Skin for the Old Ceremony. And it's probably most well known for the second track on here called Chelsea Hotel No. 2, which is fantastic. But on the movie, I don't know if you've ever seen this movie. If you're into Leonard Cohen and you want to see a great documentary, check out Bird on a Wire. And in this film, he does a version of Chelsea Hotel. And it's a long version before we recorded this one on this particular CD or album. And it's this really almost completely different version than the one that was released. The outro is really, it has a completely different outro. On this particular documentary, he's playing throughout Europe. And he's playing, he begins in Dublin. And then he goes through London, Amsterdam, Berlin, Tel Aviv. And he's pretty much showcasing, songs from his catalog, but also upcoming songs that would feature on this particular album here. So back to this album here, a lot of great tracks. Who by Fire, which he was still playing up until, his last tour. You've got Take This Longing, which is fantastic. There Is a War. Lover, Lover, Lover. Very underrated Leonard Cohen album here. New Skin for the Old Ceremony from 1974. And last but not least, a really fine singer, songwriter. He was the lead singer of the Youngbloods. If you don't know the Youngbloods, they had the hit Get Together. They also had a fantastic album in 1969 called Elephant Mountain. This is Jesse Colin Young's album, Song for Julie. Really cool, kind of folk, almost borderline jazz kind of singer-songwriter album here. The first side is just flawless. Morning Sun starts it off. You got Song for Julie. Ridgetop is one of the highlights of this album, the third track. Then you've got Evening. And then the second side, maybe not as strong, but there's some highlights on here like T-Bone Shuffle, Country House. Really, really fine album. I think this is his biggest seller in the U.S. So Jesse Colin Young, this is from 1973, and this is called Song for Julie. So those are just 10 examples of some unsung singer-songwriter albums from the 1970s. If you had any more to add, throw them in the comments section. As always, thank you for watching. If you dig the content, press subscribe. It's free. And thanks again, everyone. Take care. We'll see you soon. Bye-bye.